I never loved you. I'm sorry.
No.
He said he hated me, so I left, and 3 years later he came back. Enea Marchetti didn't shout. He didn't explain. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just looked me in the eyes and said the line that destroyed everything I was still trying to save. I left that night with my pride in pieces, my heart in silence, and the vow that I would never let that man find me again. But Naples doesn't bury its ghosts. She gives them back, dressed in danger. Years later, when death came for me, he was the one who showed up. The same man, the same gaze, the same pain I had spent years pretending not to remember. And when his blood touched my dress, I stopped asking whether he hated me or loved me, and I started praying that he could still answer me. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1. The Woman in Green at the Hall. The old coffee maker coughed on the kitchen counter before letting out the dark liquid, and the smell filled the apartment as if it were the only warm thing about that morning. I pulled the robe up over my shoulders, picked up the chipped porcelain cup that had been Nona's since before I was born, and walked down the narrow hallway to the back bedroom. Nonna Rosa was sitting on the bed, her blue shawl over her shoulders, and the little box of pills open on her lap. Her heart was an old machine that insisted on running every morning out of pure stubbornness, and I gave thanks for that stubbornness every day of my life. Hai bevuto in tempo? I asked, setting the cup on the nightstand. She lifted her eyes to me and smiled in that way only Neapolitan grandmothers know how to smile, a mix of tenderness and irony that fits any situation. I took them. You sleep too much, Perla. Life starts before the sun. I kissed the top of her head, caught the scent of talcum and lavender that had always been hers, and went back to the kitchen thinking about how much each of those little boxes cost. The bills lined up at the end of the month like a tight dress, but they lined up. I went up the inside staircase that connected the apartment to the studio above. The steps creaked in the same 3 spots as always, and my feet already knew them by heart. The wooden door of the workbench was half open, and the morning light came through the skylights in the roof, falling on the works being restored, as if it were a holy place. Maybe it was. Mafalda was already there, in her stained apron, her hair held up by a paintbrush stuck through it, and half a roll in her mouth. She looked up when she saw me and chewed faster. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, still chewing. "Guess what I was just thinking about while I ate your snack?" "You're eating my snack?" "Technical detail. I'm thinking your Madonna is prettier than a Sunday bride." The curator from the foundation called. Again, and she said that if the restorer doesn't show up at the auction, she's coming herself to drag you there by the ears. I set my bag on the worn leather chair. The 17th century Madonna was on the easel, finished 2 days ago, with the blue mantle restored in the spots where time had eaten away the paint. I had spent 6 months working on that piece. Every millimeter of her face was mine like a fingerprint. "Mafalda, I'm not going." "You're going." "I'm not." She bit into the bread, chewed slowly, looked at me with the calm of someone who had already won the argument before it even started. "Perla, listen. You spent 6 months breathing in this woman in the blue mantle. The whole city is going to see the piece tonight, and you're going to stay home, in your robe, pretending this doesn't interest you? Please. You're not broken. You're crackled. You can be restored, and one of the techniques is to get up off the stool." I laughed against my will. I sat on the bench next to her, and stole a piece of the bread she had stolen from me, and we sat for a while without speaking, listening to the old radio play a song no one listened to anymore. "He'll be there," I said quietly. Mafalda stopped chewing. She didn't answer right away. When she did, there was no theatrics. "Probably, but you'll be there too, and you'll be there with the most beautiful piece in the hall. Let him deal with his own presence." I took another sip of coffee and looked at the Madonna in the blue mantle. She looked back at me with that gaze I had rebuilt over the past few weeks, stitch by stitch. Maybe I should at least go see her piece be presented. Maybe I should at least pretend I had a life of my own. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." Mafalda clapped her hands as if I had announced a wedding. "Excellent. And you're wearing the green dress." "I'm not wearing the green one." "Yes, you are. I saw it yesterday in the back of the closet, and I refused to wait 3 years to see somebody wear that thing again. It's well past time." She went back to the bench, to a small canvas she was cleaning with a cotton swab soaked in solvent, and I realized she had decided everything before I even woke up. Best friends have that ability to plan your afternoon without telling you, and you end up going, because it's more exhausting to argue than to obey. In the afternoon I went back down to the apartment. The dress was in the back of the closet, wrapped in a plastic bag I had gotten from the store, with the tag still hanging from it. Deep green, velvet, V-neck. It was another woman's dress, the woman I had been 3 years ago, before all of Naples turned the corner without greeting me by name. I pulled it out of the plastic. I tried it on. It fell as if time hadn't passed, and as if too much time had passed all at once. I looked in the bedroom mirror, fixed my hair into a low bun, left 2 strands loose at my temples. I wasn't shaking. Not yet. Nonna appeared in the doorway, dragging her slippers. She looked me up and down, with that gaze of hers that assessed every inch, like someone assessing a freshly restored saint. "Are you going to see him?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. In Naples, no one needed to say his name inside that room. The whole city knew who had broken my chest, and no one spoke it out loud because the Marchetti Camorra had taught Naples, over generations, that certain names are only spoken in low voices, in chapels, and in confessions. The omertà wasn't only the silence among them. It was the silence that also surrounded the woman who had been chosen, and then discarded, in a single night. "I'm going to see the piece, Nonna," I said, and it was almost true. She nodded slowly, held my hand for a moment, and squeezed. "Chin up, daughter. You're a Vitiello. We don't lower our heads to anyone." The rideshare car dropped me off at the entrance of the San Gennaro Foundation Hall a little before 8. The place was an old restored palace, with polychrome marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a frescoed ceiling I myself had helped document 2 years before. I greeted the curator with kisses on the cheek, listened to compliments that went in one ear and out the other, was introduced to the auction's patron as the Madonna's restorer, and answered everything with that steady-handed courtesy that is my mother tongue. I had an untouched glass of Prosecco in my hand when the air in the hall changed. It wasn't anything visible at first. It was an almost imperceptible lowering of the voices. The waiters stepped back toward the walls without anyone asking. An elderly lady stopped laughing in the middle of a sentence. I didn't need to turn to know. The body knows before the head does. I felt the weight come through the main door, cross the red carpet as if the world owed it passage, and stop the glass on its way to my lips. When I finally looked, he was already in the center of the hall. Black tuxedo, no tie, the top button of the collar undone. The dark hair a little shorter than I remembered. No gray, but with something harder in the line of his face that he hadn't had 3 years before. The hard jaw, the mouth closed in the exact line of someone who never asks for anything, because he never had to. Behind him, 2 steps back, came Battista, the consigliere, with that ceremonious elegance he wore like a uniform. Enea Marchetti walked across the hall as if every meter of that floor had been laid there for him. He acknowledged a man with a brief nod, refused a glass with a gesture of his hand, and when his gaze swept the hall, it found mine across the sea of heads and expensive hairdos. Time did that strange thing it does at the wrong moments. It stretched. I saw in his expression the exact second he recognized me. It wasn't surprise. It was the recognition of something he had expected to find, and that still hurt to find. His jaw clenched a millimeter, then relaxed. The dark eyes didn't let go of mine, and mine went right past him. I didn't look to the side, didn't glance away in a hurry. I let his gaze pass through mine as if he were a curtain, a wall, air. I went back to talking to the curator next to me, with the steadiness of a hand holding a brush over a delicate piece, and asked some question or other about the catalog. The curator answered, and I didn't hear. I felt the blood come back to my face 20 minutes later, in the empty bathroom, with my hands braced on the cold marble sink. They were shaking. Furious that they were shaking, I clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. I washed my face, dried it, lifted my chin in the mirror the way Nonna had told me to. I went back to the hall just long enough to see the Madonna unveiled, hear the polite applause, smile for the official photo, and decide that the rest of the auction could go on without me. I said goodbye to the curator with the excuse of a headache, avoided the central path where he was still standing, picked up my coat from the cloakroom, and went down on the service elevator. The foundation's parking lot was in an old building, 2 blocks down, and the Naples night had gotten colder than I expected. The streets around were almost empty at that hour, a Sunday at the end of an event, people already tucked in at home. I pulled the coat tight against my chest and walked along the dimly lit block, counting the lampposts to fill my head with anything other than his tuxedo crossing the marble. The entrance to the parking lot was a side gate, with weak yellow light and the smell of oil. I went down the ramp, stepping into the echo of my own heels. I searched for the rental car key inside my bag. The space was on the second basement level, and the inner elevator was under maintenance, so I took the service stairs. I was already in the concrete corridor when I heard them. 2 men, one in front, one behind. They weren't talking to each other. They were waiting. The one in front stepped out from behind a column about 5 meters away from me, walking unhurried. Dark coat, empty hands, broad shoulders. The other one, behind, blocked the exit I had come in through. I stopped. The bag felt heavy in my hand, as if it were asking to be offered up. "Good evening, Signorina," said the one in front, with an accent that wasn't Neapolitan. I didn't answer. I took half a step back. The other one, behind, stepped back with me, keeping the exact same distance between us. "We don't want your bag," he went on, and his smile was the coldest thing I had seen all day. "We just want to confirm one quick thing. Are you per la Vitiello?" I felt the blood drop from my shoulders down to my feet, as if my body already knew what my head hadn't yet understood. They hadn't shown up to rob me. They had shown up with a name. My name. The hand of the man in front went down to his coat, on the inside, and time started to stretch in that wrong way again. That's when the first shot went off behind me. Chapter 2. His blood on my hand. The echo bounced off the concrete walls and ran through my ribs before the sound reached my head. I threw myself against the nearest column on pure reflex, with my hands over the back of my neck, and the next 2 shots came so close together they sounded like one. The man who had been in front of me dropped to his knees first, with his hand still inside his coat, and toppled sideways onto the concrete floor. The one in the rear spun toward the shot, but he wasn't fast enough. Before I understood where the gunfire was coming from, a tall shadow crossed the corridor with the agility of someone who had been doing it for many years, and the second attacker took a punch to the face that threw him against a parked car. The tuxedo was open, the white shirt showing, and his steps were steady even on the smooth floor. Enea. He grabbed the second man by the collar and lifted him half a foot off the ground. The guy pulled something from an inside pocket. I saw the glint of the blade before I saw the whole thing, and drove it into Enea's right flank with the force of someone who had been trained for it. Enea let out a low, guttural sound, more rage than pain, and his answer came in 3 sharp movements. I looked away before the last one. When I looked back, the man was on the floor, and Enea was standing in the middle of the corridor, with his hand pressed against his flank, and blood spreading slowly between his fingers over the white fabric. He crossed the 5 meters that separated us in 4 steps. His free hand came up to my face before he even spoke. His fingers were cold, and there was a slight tremor in them that I didn't know whether was his or mine. "Are you in one piece?" His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. I wanted to answer that I wasn't, that nothing in me had been in one piece for 3 years, that I hadn't asked to be saved by him precisely because of him. But the only thing that came out of my mouth was a nod, because his ears were already going out of focus, and his knees gave out before my yes did. He collapsed to his knees first, then sat against the column, and I went with him without deciding, with both hands over his, trying to maintain the pressure that he no longer had the strength to keep alone. The blood was warm. It was the first concrete thing I registered in that yellow-lit basement. How warm his blood was, as it soaked through the fabric onto my skin. Battista came running down the corridor before I could shout for help. I have no idea where he had come from. I only know that he was already on his knees on the other side of Enea, with the phone to his ear and giving orders in technical Italian, those short sentences the Camorra uses instead of full words. "Signora," he turned to me, and the ceremony in his voice was intact despite everything. "The car is on its way. You're coming with us." "I'll call an ambulance," I said, my voice too loud. Battista looked at me calmly, with that calm that's frightening precisely because it is calm. "No hospital, signora. None of ours go to hospitals. It's the rule. He's bleeding, which is why you're coming." I looked at Enea's face, leaning against the column, his eyes half closed, his chin stained by his own sweat. He searched for my eyes from beneath the heavy lids, and I saw, in the depths of that darkness that had always been too dark for me, something that looked like a request. It wasn't an order. It was a request. I didn't yet know how to say no to a request like that. "I'll go," I said, "but this doesn't mean anything." Battista tilted his head 0.5 millimeter, in respect. "Naturally, signora." The car was a black sedan, low, with tinted windows, and it stopped at the parking ramp without making a sound. 2 men from the family carried Enea to the back seat, and I got in on the other side, because someone needed to keep pressure on the flank, and none of those rough arms was going to manage the delicacy of a restorer's hand. Hands are for what they are for. Mine that night were for that. We crossed Naples through the alleys that avoid the traffic cameras. I recognized 2 neighborhoods, then lost count. Enea was breathing in short pulses, his head against the headrest, and he didn't speak to me in the car. He spoke only once, to Battista, in a sentence I didn't understand because of the dialect. Battista answered in one word, and Enea closed his eyes. The Marchetti property was an old mansion above the Gulf, in one of those high corners from which you can see the whole city blinking in low lights and the sea breathing slowly down below. The iron gate opened without anyone needing to ring a bell. The car came up an avenue of cypresses, stopped at the main entrance, and then it was all hands. Hands taking Enea, hands opening doors, hands leading me up the stairs. The room where they laid him was on the second floor, with the window open to the Gulf and a strong smell of antiseptic that someone had already started to pour. The trusted doctor arrived even before we got upstairs. Battista called him Dr. Greco. He was a thin man, with glasses, no questions. He glanced at me, registered that I was there, and went back to the patient as if I were part of the furniture. Enea's shirt was cut off with scissors, not unbuttoned. The wound was on the right flank, deep enough to be worrying and shallow enough to survive, according to the doctor, who said it with that coldness of professionals who see this every day. He stitched him up right there, on the bed, with a local anesthetic that didn't quite cover everything. Enea didn't shout. Enea closed his eyes, breathed through his nose, and bore each stitch as if each stitch were a decision. I stayed leaning against the wall on the other side of the room, with my arms crossed, with my hands trembling hidden under my elbows. Battista came over to me at some point. He brought a glass of water I hadn't asked for, and stood next to me, respectful, with that way of a man who knew how to wait. "Signora," he said low, without looking directly at me, "may I speak with you for a minute?" I nodded. He led me out into the hallway, closed the bedroom door behind us with a strange delicacy for a man his size, and stopped by the hallway window. "Those two men weren't thieves," he said. "You've already understood that." I understood. They were a job. From people who have reason to be asking for your name in the middle of a parking lot. I looked at him, waited. Battista chose his words slowly, like someone pulling a stone out of a river. "Signora, you know what we are. You don't know the details, but you know the name. Camorra. It's an old mafia based on family clans, and the Don of this house is the Don of the Marchetti. The rule is simple. No one who serves the family goes to a hospital. Hospitals have police. Police have records. Records have judges. We have Dr. Greco. We always have. And what does that have to do with me? It has to do, Signora, with the fact that the Don doesn't trust his own body to just anyone. I tightened my arms across my body. And he trusts me. Is that it? Battista looked me in the eyes for the first time. His irony was dry, but the truth wasn't. He trusts you, Signora, precisely because you have more than enough reason to let him die. If he wakes up, it's because you chose for him to wake up, and nothing in the Don's life has more value to him than your choice. I breathed. The hallway air smelled of floor wax and pine from the garden. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I was going to call a taxi, go back to my apartment, open a bottle of cheap wine with Mafalda, and pretend that night hadn't happened. I wanted to wish for him to die, and I wanted to find out, an hour from now, that he had died. I had sworn to myself 3 years before that I would never choose that man again for anything. But there, in the hallway of his house, with my hands still stained with his blood, I understood something very ugly about wounded pride. It feeds on answers, and I didn't have any. "I'll stay," I said. Not out of love, consigliere, out of rage, and for answers. Battista tilted his head. "Naturally, Signora. Stop calling me Signora." "Yes, Signora." I almost laughed. Almost. I went back into the room. Dr. Greco was finishing the stitches, washing his hands in a porcelain basin. He looked at me over his glasses. "He'll spike a fever in the next few hours," he said. "I'll be back in the morning. You change the bandage if it gets wet. The antibiotic is over there, every 6 hours. Morphine only if he asks, and he won't ask. Good night." He left as if he were a delivery driver who had dropped off a package. Battista turned off the harsh ceiling light and left only the low lamp by the bed on. He left too, and closed the door with that earlier care. And I was alone with Enea. The chair by the bed was dark wood, hard, the kind used in dining rooms. I pulled it closer and sat, rested my elbows on my knees, looked at him. Without the tuxedo, without the posture, without the hall around him, he was just a man lying on his side. The skin on his flank was stained brick red with mercurochrome, the stitches small and even, the white bandage applied over everything. His chest rose and fell in an uneven rhythm. The dark hair fell on his forehead. His lashes were longer than I remembered, maybe because 3 years before I had never stopped to look at a sleeping man's lashes. I only looked at his open eyes. The fever came around 3 in the morning, the way the doctor had said it would. Enea's skin went red in patches at his neck. His lip cracked from thirst. I wet a cloth in the basin, folded it, and laid it on his forehead. I changed it twice. I ran my hand over his temple to fix his sweat-damp hair, and that's when he spoke for the first time in hours. Perla. It came out low, from inside the delirium, without him opening his eyes. I pulled my hand back as if his skin were burning, and maybe it was burning, but not from the fever. Perla, he repeated. I didn't answer. I pressed my lips together, put the cloth back in the basin, folded it again. He went on repeating my name every 15-20 minutes, in low pulses, like someone praying a rosary he had forgotten halfway through. Each time he repeated it, I bit the inside of my cheek harder, and forced myself to read it as an effect of the antibiotic, of the fever, of the shock, anything other than what it was. Around 4, he opened his eyes for the first time. He looked for me in the dark of the room, took a moment to focus, and found me. His free hand moved over the sheet, crossed the small distance between us, and closed with what was left of his strength around my wrist. I looked at his hand on top of mine. The ring finger was bare, as it had always been. His fingers were long, with calluses on the index. His fingers were warm. I pulled my wrist away slowly, not violently, slowly. I'm taking care of the body, Don, I said low. The rest stays dead. He closed his eyes. He accepted it. His hand fell back onto the sheet, empty, and I swore to myself that the slight nod against the pillow had not been sadness. I went on changing the cloth on his forehead. I went on measuring his breathing with my own. I went on holding, in my chest, the line I had just said, because it was true. It was still true. But it had to be said out loud to keep being. Around 6, with the first gray light of morning coming in through the window over the gulf, I pulled the wooden chair closer to the door without realizing I was pulling it. I leaned the back of the chair against the doorknob, rested my head on my hands, closed my eyes for a minute, just a minute, I promised myself. When I woke up, the light was already low and golden. The cloth on his forehead was dry and warm, and I was still in the green dress, wrinkled, with dried blood on the hem. I looked at the bed. Enea was turned on his side, not toward the wall, toward me, even asleep, semi-conscious, feverish. He had turned his body in my direction during the night, and the chair was leaning against the door because I, without realizing it, had moved it there, so that no one could come in without going through my body first. I sat very still in the chair, my hands in my lap, watching his chest rise and fall, and I understood for the first time, with a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning, that I hadn't come just out of rage, or just for answers, and that was by far the most dangerous thing I had discovered that night. Chapter 3. Pages Folded by Another Hand. The first thing I learned about the Marchetti house was that it breathes under its breath. The hallways have rugs that are too thick, the doors close without a click, the servants walk barefoot inside their own shoes. Everything in the mansion above the gulf seems trained not to wake the dawn, even when the dawn has been awake for hours, pretending to sleep so that I won't know he's watching me. 3 days had gone by since the first night. 3 days that had drawn themselves into a routine I had installed myself, by the instinct of someone who needs a frame to keep from collapsing. In the morning, I changed the bandage. Steady hands, fresh gauze, antiseptic that stung him more than it stung me. And even so, it was him biting his lip to deny me the satisfaction. I didn't speak. He didn't ask. The silence between us had the texture of old leather, worn, still strong. Then I would go down to the kitchen and call Nonna on the mansion's landline. I'd read the paper to her aloud, skipping the pages that mentioned clans and gunshots, as if the ink on those pages burned. Nonna would ask for news about politics, the weather, the parish auction. She never asked where I was. I didn't say either. It was a silent agreement that, deep down, hurt me. Are you eating? I would ask. I'm taking my medicine, Perlita. Did you buy it properly this time? I bought it. That I bought it was beginning to scratch at me from inside. I had always bought it. I had always tightened the budget, always paid the pharmacy bill in advance, always swallowed the fear of not making it work. And then, someday, I was going to find out that maybe it hadn't been only me. I just didn't know it yet. Batista crossed the veranda on the third morning carrying a bowl of figs. He wore his usual lead-gray suit, a narrow tie, polished shoes as if there was a workday on. "Signora?" he greeted me, as always, with the ceremonious deference I had already given up correcting. "The dawn doesn't sleep if you're not in the house. I thought you should know." I didn't answer. I stared at the bowl of figs, stared at the gulf, stared at the dry paint on my wrist. Battista left the figs on the table, adjusted his tie, and went out the way he had come in, without a sound. I took paint to the veranda on the third day so I wouldn't go mad. I set the small canvas on the improvised easel and painted the blue of the sea, wrong on purpose, darker than it actually was, because the sea in that place felt like a promise to me, and I wasn't yet ready to paint promises. That was when I turned my head and saw him standing at the veranda door, leaning against the frame, his right arm steady, and his left tending to his flank. He was watching me in the way I hated, without disguise, without shame, as if watching were the oldest thing he knew how to do. "Who sent the men?" I asked without turning again, the brush still in the wrong blue. "Perla. Who sent them, Enea?" He came onto the veranda slowly. He sat down in the chair on the other side of the table, far enough not to suffocate me, close enough for me to hear the way he was controlling his breathing. "From myself," he said, in a low voice. I tightened my grip on the brush, put it back in the cup, wiped the pigment from my fingers with the dirty cloth, slowly, so as not to break the only steady thing I had that morning, which was my closed face. "If I'm going to stay here as a babysitter, I deserve to know who I'm hiding from," I said. He looked at me. His eyes were dark, too dark, the kind that trapped the light inside instead of giving it back. And he answered me only with that, "From myself," lodged between us like a rusty nail. I slammed the veranda door on my way out. It was small, childish, and I didn't care. The mansion's library was at the end of the hallway in the west wing, with tall windows facing the garden. I had sworn to myself I wouldn't go in there, because a library is always a trap for people who think too much. But the rain started in the afternoon of the fourth day, and the veranda became impossible. The shelves rose to the ceiling, volumes bound in dark leather, handwritten labels, a smell of old paper and wax that reminded me of Mafalda's studio in the winters, when the heating couldn't keep up. It was on the third shelf of the second case that I saw it. A dark green volume, worn spine, gold letters half faded, Sicilian frescoes, churches of Taormina, and the interior. I knew that book better than I recognized my own handwriting. It had been mine for 5 years. I had forgotten it on the night he dismissed me, left on the sofa of the house that never got to be ours, tossed among the shards of what was left. I pulled it from the shelf with a trembling finger. I opened it. The pages were folded. Not all of them. 17 of them, I counted later, with the care of a restorer. Pages folded at passages about Taormina, about Cefalù, about the light that comes through the Baroque rosettes at the end of the day. Pages I had never read, because I had bought the book on impulse and never gotten past the middle. Someone read it for me. Someone folded each page with the care of someone going back to a beloved passage. I closed the book hard. It hit my chest dryly, the way a door hits when you believe you've locked it from the inside and find it wide open. I put the volume back on the shelf, exactly where it had been. I left the library, stepping softly so as not to wake the house. But my heart was already awake, and this time there was no rug thick enough to muffle it. Dinner that night was the first one I didn't ask to have brought up to my room on a tray. I sat at the big oak table, far enough from him that our silverware wouldn't touch, close enough that he would know I was there because I had chosen to be. He ate little. He cut slowly, brought it to his mouth slowly, like someone who makes each gesture with the other shoulder, calculating the pain. "Eating keeps you alive, Dawn," I said, without raising my eyes from my plate. "I assume that still interests you." He stopped his fork in midair, was silent for a second that weighed, and then he smiled. Half a smile, one corner of his mouth going up while the other stayed in place, as if he had forgotten how to do it, and was relearning in the dark. "It does," he answered. I went back to my figs with the skin on. I pretended his smile hadn't fallen between my ribs, like a small stone sinking slowly in still water. The rain went on outside. Somewhere in the house, a clock marked the hour with the discretion trained by the mansion. "Will you have wine, signora?" Battista asked, appearing out of nowhere with the bottle. "No." "Very well, signora." He filled the Don's glass and withdrew. Enea raised his glass to me, in a silent toast that I didn't return. He drank anyway. I got up from the table before coffee. I went up the stairs without running. In the room, I leaned the chair against the door again, without thinking, and slept without changing my clothes. I woke up to a noise. It wasn't thunder, although the rain was still beating on the window. It was a different sound, Sharp footsteps in the garden, a snapping branch, a dog barking briefly and stopping all at once, the way a dog only stops barking when someone tells it to. I jumped out of bed barefoot. The clock read 3:17 in the morning. I opened the bedroom door in time to see Ania already in the hallway, barefoot, in dark trousers, the white shirt open over the bandage that had been redone that afternoon. He had the pistol in his right hand. The left was black with pain, folded against his flank. "Go back," he said without turning to me. "You can barely stand. Go back, Perla." I didn't go back. I followed him down the hallway, down the steps of the main staircase that the house made breathe under my feet, to the foyer. Batista was already there, with 2 armed men I had never seen, and made the short, dry gesture for Enea to step back. Enea didn't step back. He pushed me behind him with his good arm. His hand found my sternum for 1 second only, firm, possessive, and pushed me against the foyer wall as if I were something he needed to put in safety before anything else in the world. I felt the cold of the stone on my back. I felt the warmth of his back centimeters from my nose. I felt the blood come back to his bandage, slowly staining the white shirt. "Enea, the bandage. Stay behind." He aimed at the door. Batista's men crossed the garden in the rain. There was a thud, a muffled fall, a stifled voice. 30 seconds, maybe 40. I didn't breathe for any of them. Batista came back first, soaked, adjusting his tie as if the tie were the most important thing in the world. He bowed a millimeter to Ania. "A message, Dawn, not an execution. 1 thug, alone, no serious ammunition. They've taken him to talk." "Who sent him?" "He hasn't said yet." "He'll say, Dawn. Let me know when he does." "Yes, Dawn." Batista looked at me then. His look was that of someone silently asking forgiveness for a scene he hadn't chosen to show the Signora. He left without saying anything else. Enea lowered the pistol. He didn't move away from me. We were still wall against back, back against back, and his blood had already crossed the shirt in a dark flower the size of my hand. "You got up," I said. My voice came out higher than I meant. "You opened up the flank. You're an idiot, Ania. You're an idiot, idiot, idiot." I hit his chest with both hands. It wasn't a punch. It was the gesture of a child discovering that fear and rage fit into the same verb. He held my wrists with his good hand, slowly, without squeezing, as if he understood I needed to hit a little more before stopping. "If I fall, you fall after," he said, very low. "I won't allow it." I looked at him. The rain was coming in through the half-open door and wetting the foyer rug. His blood went on advancing on his shirt, and I understood, coldly, with a fright that wasn't romantic, that he had placed himself between me and the kitchen door on the morning of coffee, between me and the veranda door on the afternoon of painting, between me and the foyer door now. He always positioned himself between me and any door, and I didn't know how to name what that was. He let go of my wrists. He stayed where he was, waiting for me to move first, because he had decided, at some point in the last 3 days, that I was the one who decided the step. I stepped back slowly to the foot of the stairs. He stayed where he was, barefoot on the soaked rug, the pistol hanging from his right hand, blood on his shirt. I went up 1 step. I stopped. "Come," I said without looking back. "Come redo this bandage before I call Dr. Greco at this damned hour." He came, on the stairs behind me. His breathing was as controlled as ever, but there was a small crack at the end of each inhale, and this time I was the one who pretended not to hear. When I laid the new gauze over his flank, in my room, under the yellow light of the lamp, he closed his eyes. He didn't say my name. He said nothing. And I, with the steady hands I had learned to have since I was a girl, noticed for the first time that my hands weren't steady. They were pretending. I pressed the strip of tape down. I stood up. I went to the door where, 3 nights ago, I had leaned the chair to sleep, and stopped with my back to him. "Dawn," I said, without turning. "Yes. The next time you get up with an open flank because of any door, I'll push you back into bed myself." He let out a breath. It was almost a laugh. Almost. "Agreed, Signora." I rested my forehead against the door. I couldn't decide whether to lock it or not. I ended up not locking it, and as I lay back down in the bed, 3 steps from the armchair where he was now sleeping, I stayed awake for a whole hour, just thinking that, somewhere in that huge house, there was a dark green book with 17 pages folded by a hand that wasn't mine, and that this hand had learned to position itself between me and any door in the world long before I let it. I didn't know yet how to name what it was, but I knew it had a name. Chapter 4. The Name That Wasn't Mine. Morning came without warning, the way every morning comes after a night like that. The rain had stopped at some point before dawn, and the gulf appeared down below washed clean, blue-silver, the way only Naples can be when it pretends innocence. I went down to the breakfast veranda with heavy eyes. Enea was already there, sitting, in a clean shirt, his left shoulder a little lower than the right because of the flank. The table set for two, bread, honey, figs, black coffee steaming in the silver coffee pot. I sat without saying good morning. He pushed the coffee pot in my direction without asking permission. I served myself. I drank. "How is Nonna?" he asked. The cup stopped halfway to my mouth. I looked at him. He was cutting bread slowly, with his right hand, pretending he had asked some random thing, but my grandmother's name in his mouth had the weight of a confession. "How do you know about Nonna?" "I always knew, Perla." I set down the cup. Slowly, so as not to break the porcelain. I stared at him. "Always knew what, exactly?" "That she has a weak heart, that she takes 3 pills a day, and one of them is imported, that she has lived alone since your mother passed, that you buy the medicine at the pharmacy on Via Tribunali because the pharmacist gives you a discount." Each sentence went in through a different rib. I gripped the edge of the table. "Battista," I said. "It wasn't Battista." "Then who?" He didn't answer. That's when Battista crossed the veranda behind us, phone to his ear, talking in a low, technical Italian, and the only sentence that escaped whole was, "The transfer from the foundation to Mrs. Vidiello goes through today, Don." He realized half a second too late. He looked at me. He lowered the phone. He left. There was a long silence inside me that cost me dearly. I stood still. The coffee pot still steamed between Enea and me. The sun came straight onto the veranda. Down below, a boat blew its horn at the port. "Foundation," I repeated. He set the knife down. "For how long?" I asked. 3 years. 3 years. Yes. I laughed. It was a dry laugh with no music in it, the kind that hurts the throat of the one laughing. "You bought my conscience for 3 years, Enea Marchetti." "It wasn't conscience." "What was it then?" He looked at me, and I saw that small crack come back to the edge of his breath. He didn't answer me. Again, it was his specialty, not answering with words the questions he had already answered with gestures. I stood up. The chair scraped sharply against the floor. "I pay back what I owe," I said, "out of my own pocket, with interest." "Perla, don't call me that right now." I stomped out across the veranda, through the living room, down the hallway. I crossed the garden in the morning. I came back. I crossed it again. I didn't know what to do with my hands. The steady hands that had stitched blood and folded gauze and painted blue all wrong were trembling as if I were a girl again. That afternoon, he stumbled. It was small. He got up too quickly from the library sofa. His flank protested. He lost his right foot for a second, and his hand reached for support in the empty air. It was mine that appeared. I held his wrist with a restorer's strength. A wide wrist, warm, pulsing fast under my fingers. He straightened his body. I didn't let go. He didn't ask me to let go. We stood there, a touch too long to be an accident, a touch that should have lasted 2 seconds and lasted 10, a touch in which I felt his skin learn my skin again as if relearning a smell from childhood. I let go. He didn't thank me, because he knew that thanking me there would be ending it before its time. "Library," he said. "Tonight." "Why?" "Because I owe you a sentence, Perla." The library at night had the yellow light of a lamp, and the smell of the dark green book that I hadn't taken back off the shelf since I recognized it. He was standing by the window, white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearm, not in the 3 careless turns a man like him usually does, but in only 2 turns, restrained, the way of someone whose flank is still hurting. The rugs muffled my steps. I closed the door. "I want the sentence again," I said, without preamble. He turned. The lamp was throwing a shadow on his face on one side only, and the lit side had the line of his jaw I had sworn to forget, and never forgot. "What sentence?" "You know what sentence, Dawn." He didn't answer. I stepped forward. 1 step. Another. I crossed the gray-blue Persian rug until I was a hand's breadth from him. His chest was rising and falling under control, but the control had a crack at its edge again. "Say again that you never loved me," I said, low. He looked at me. He didn't look away. He didn't step back, and he didn't say it. "Say it, Enea." Silence. Coward with words, Dawn. Who would have thought? His hand came up. It was fast, and it was slow. Fast because it reached me before I could breathe again. Slow because his fingers settled on the back of my neck, like someone setting a brush down on fresh varnish, careful not to ruin what they were restoring. The fingers warm, rough at the tips. His thumb found the line of my jaw and stopped there, asking without asking. I didn't pull back. He leaned in. His nose touched mine. His breath smelled of black coffee and of the whiskey he hadn't drunk. I felt the wall of the bookshelf behind me without remembering having stepped back into it. A centimeter, maybe less. His phone rang. It was a vibration first, in his chest pocket, then sound. A sharp ring. No music, the kind that the man who lives by the phone sets so as never to confuse it with a joke. He closed his eyes. For half a second, I saw his jaw lock. "Inia," I whispered, and I myself didn't know whether it was a plea for him to answer or not to answer. He answered. He let go of my nape slowly, took 3 steps back, turned his back to me before bringing the phone to his ear. The white shirt, seen from behind, showed the shadow of the bandage at the flank. "Talk," he said. Pause. No. Pause. "She doesn't know yet. Let's keep it that way for now." Pause. Longer. "Sienna, listen." The name came out slowly and came out whole. Sienna. 4 letters I had never heard him pronounce, and that he pronounced with the familiarity of someone who had been pronouncing it for a long time. I stayed leaning against the bookcase, heart in my throat. "She can't know," he said in the low voice I knew, in the dawn's voice, in the voice I had mistaken for the voice of a man for 3 whole days. "Not now. You have my word." Pause. "I'll handle it. I always have. Hang up." He hung up. It took 3 seconds before he turned. I saw his nape straighten first, then his shoulders, then his neck. When his face appeared again, it was the closed face of the auction hall, the face from the black tuxedo, the face that had told me, 3 years before, in front of witnesses, in the cleanest voice I had ever heard come out of him, "I never loved you." 5 words. There were only 5, and they had learned, in those 3 years, to close the same way every time they needed to come back. "Perla," he began. "No, no, Enea. I left the library. I didn't run. I walked the way a woman walks when she has learned to walk out because running is admitting that it hurts. In the bedroom, I packed the bag. Mafalda used to say that packing a bag in a crisis was proof I was sane. Other women broke dishes. I folded blouse after blouse in 3 precise stages. I folded that night the 3 blouses I had brought. I folded the pants. I folded the green dress, which had been with me since the auction. I folded it slowly, as if it too needed care. I didn't cry. I went down. Battista was at the foot of the stairs, hands clasped in front, his expression trained not to have an expression. "Signora, I don't want an escort, consigliere. You'll have one anyway." Discreetly. "Battista. Signora, please." I looked at him. He was a middle-aged man, a little gray at the temples, in his lead-gray suit again, with eyes that didn't know how to blink at the wrong time. And in his eyes, that night, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Pity. Not pity for me. Pity for him. For the Don. For what the Don did to himself every time I closed a door. I had no way of understanding yet. "Get out of my way, Battista." "Yes, signora." He moved, but he didn't take his eyes off me until I reached the door. The property's gate was wrought iron with a lion and an olive tree at the center, an old crest. In 3 years I had never gone through it in daylight, only on that night at the parking lot, when I came in nearly fainting along with the man who was bleeding all over me. Now I was walking out, bag in hand, low-heeled shoes, black coat, hair tied back. I was almost halfway down the path when I heard the noise behind me, bare feet on the gravel. I turned. Enea crossed the garden without a coat, without shoes, with the white shirt open again on the bandage that had bled through one more time that night. He stopped 3 steps away. He didn't touch me. "Perla." "No," I lied. The word came out dry and stayed. I didn't answer. "I lied, Perla, that night. I lied to take you off a list I didn't know how to clean. There was no other woman, not one. The name you heard isn't what you're thinking, and I can't tell you more today without putting you back on that list." Pause. "I'm just asking you one thing." "What?" "Don't cross that gate without hearing the rest someday." I looked at him. His bare feet on the gravel, the stained bandage, the wrinkled shirt, the hair tousled like someone who had run down, the dark eyes that still kept light inside instead of giving it back, and the locked jaw of the Don who was learning, in that instant, in the garden of his own mansion, to ask for the first time. He hadn't promised. He had confessed. And confession, I know as a restorer, is the one layer you can't fake. The bag fell from my hand before I decided to let go. The gravel muffled the thud. I felt the air leave my chest all at once, as if 3 years of held breath had found the crack. My legs trembled, and I didn't disguise it. I covered my face with both hands for a second only, long enough for the knot in my throat to go down or up, and it went up. When I took my hands away, he was closer, without having moved closer. I had been the one to fall half a step in his direction. I didn't pull back. I didn't go forward. I stayed. "I'll stay," I said, in the cracked voice that finally stopped pretending. "But listen to what I'm about to say now, Enea Marchetti, and listen well. I'm listening. I'm not staying because I forgave you. I'm staying because I'm tired of running. Tired of carrying a bag and a black coat at night for a man who explains nothing to me. Tired of being the hidden bride who learned other people's silence before her own. Tired." He didn't interrupt. "If I find out one more lie, Enea," I went on quietly, without theatrics, "I'll close the door myself, and I'll lock it from the inside. Did you hear me?" "I heard." "Repeat it. You'll close the door yourself, and lock it from the inside. Good night, Don." I picked up the bag. I walked back slowly across the gravel, crossed the garden, climbed the 3 steps of the main entrance. Batista was in the foyer again, hands clasped, and he pretended he hadn't seen anything, which was his way of giving me back my dignity. In the bedroom, I opened the bag again. I started to undo the folds in the blouses with the same calm I had used to fold them. That's when I saw, in the corner of the room, next to his bed, because, yes, in those 3 days I had started calling it his bed, lined up like soldiers, 3 suitcases I recognized without understanding. They were mine. They were the suitcases that had stayed at my apartment 3 years before, on the day he dismissed me. Enea had had them brought, side by side, in order of size, waiting for whoever came back to unpack them. I sat down on the edge of his bed. I looked at the suitcases, and for the first time in 3 years, without warning, without permission, without dignity, I cried. Not a lot, not loudly, but I cried the way Mafalda had taught me years before. I cried like something crackled, like a broken thing that maybe could still be restored if the hand of whoever worked on it was steady enough. And out in the hallway, I heard bare feet stopping on the other side of the door, staying there, in silence, without coming in. He didn't knock. He stayed. And I, for the first time in 3 years, didn't lock it. Chapter 5. The Box. He never opened. Friday dawned brighter than the previous days, and I woke before the sun, the old habit of someone who has slept with one eye open for 3 years. I sat on the edge of the guest bed listening to the house, and the house had a different sound. Less sharp, less barracks-like. I heard Batista's steps in the hallway below, slow, as if the consigliere had guessed I needed silence to come downstairs. Enea was in the office when I passed by the half-open door, his shoulder bare halfway down, the gauze still intact from the night, his arm bent over a blueprint on the paper. He looked up, and there was something tired there that he never let show with the house full. "I need to pick up brushes," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Mine, at the studio. I don't intend to live on borrowed paint forever. I'm short on brushes, cadmium paint, 2 solvents. I can't paint with what I have." He didn't offer me Batista, or a driver, or an escort first. He took the key from his coat, put it on over the white shirt with care, and held the door as if the door were mine. "I'll take you. Or rather, Batista will drive. I'll ride in the back. I can't drive yet, and lying about it would only cost me new stitches in the flank." "You're not driving." "As you prefer, signora." Half a smile. I looked at the ceiling, then at the steam rising from my cup, and tried not to laugh. I didn't quite manage. It was a short sound, almost a breath, and Enea, who had probably already catalogued all my silences, registered that sound the way one writes down an address. The car was black, armored, with the new smell of leather mixed with the old smell of the whiskey someone had spilled on the carpet a long time ago. Batista drove in silence through the narrow alleys, and I spent the whole way leaning against the glass, counting clotheslines and balconies, pretending I didn't feel his knee 3 centimeters from mine. The smell of hot bread from a bakery slipped through the window and reminded me that I hadn't really had breakfast. "Eat something before going up," he said, stopping the car 3 meters from the gate of my street. "I'll wait here." "You're not coming up?" "No, that studio is yours. I waited 3 years to understand what it means to let you have a place where I don't go in without a key." I got out of the car with my heart pretending not to pay attention. I went up the stone steps of the building, opened the studio, and Mafalda was there, glasses on her nose, a fine brush between her teeth. When she saw me come in, she dropped everything in a single motion. "Madonna mia, you're alive." She squeezed my cheeks like someone checking fruit. "And you look pretty. What kind of danger is this? How's the patient?" "Alive. Annoying. Punctual. Brushes." I showed her the list. "Cadmium. Solvents. That little spatula." You slept there? I'm taking care of him there. You slept there, she repeated without judgment, without surprise, without even raising her voice. Perla, don't pretend in front of me that you didn't see the paint lifting. I looked at the table, at the dented tubes, at the small Madonna hanging on the panel, another piece I had been working on before everything fell apart. Her hands were still unfinished. Mafia. He kept a book of mine. For 3 years. He folded the pages I hadn't read. Mafalda rested her chin on her palm and watched me for a time that hurt. Then read, amore. You have to decide what's worth keeping. I took the brush case, 2 tubes of oil paint, the linen apron that smelled of turpentine and morning. Mafalda, out of the corner of her eye, bit half my cheese roll off the tray and said, He's waiting for you down there, isn't he? He is. Then go, and eat this before you go down, because a Don man doesn't feed you properly. I went down with my mouth full, and my embarrassment pretending to take a stroll. When I got into the car, Enea was sitting with his eyes closed, but smiled to one side when the door slammed. He knew it was me without needing to look. The drive back to the mansion was longer than necessary, because Battista took a route that went along the seafront. The morning fishermen were dragging nets across the rocks. A small ship cut across the blue in the distance. At some point, without thinking, I leaned my temple against the warm glass and dozed off for 2 minutes. In the afternoon, I set up the easel in a corner of the veranda where the sun didn't hit directly. The sun ruins the pigment, and I had ruined too much for one man. Paint wouldn't be ruined too. Enea came back a little later with a thick book in his lap, curled up on the low sofa, and read without making a sound. I painted for a whole hour in silence. The small Madonna got the fingers that were missing. I made them with more care than usual, thinking of hands that hold a wrist, hands that stitch a flank, hands that fold pages so as not to forget. Each time I changed brushes, I heard his page turn, and that, for no reason at all, made an old part of my chest relax. That was when sunset began to spill orange onto the stone, and Battista came up the 3 steps of the veranda with an old box in his arms. Dark wood, brass clasps, the size exact for things one decides to keep. Signora, he said, in the ceremonious tone of someone calling a child by their full name. With the Don's permission, this box has been kept in the East Wing for 3 years. It belongs to you. I looked at Enea. He raised his eyes from the book slowly, without surprise, like someone who has been expecting it for too long to fake being caught off guard. You can leave it there, Battista. Thank you. The consigliere set the box down on the low table, did a half nod with his head, and went downstairs. He had the rare talent of leaving a scene without closing a door. I wiped my hands on the apron longer than I needed to. Enea closed the book, but didn't get up. That was his way of giving me the next step. I took it. The clasps gave way easily. The smell that rose from the box was of stored cedar, of fabric that had slept wrapped up, of paper aging slowly. On top of everything, the dress. It wasn't an extravagant wedding dress. It was simple, ivory, low collar, short sleeves, the kind a woman of secret tastes would choose to get married in a small chapel, in a small neighborhood, with her grandmother by her side and the sea in the distance. Beneath the dress, folded with care, 2 envelopes, the priest's authorization, the marriage certificate prepared and never delivered, and in a small velvet pouch in the corner, the ring, mata gold, a line of engraving on the inside, untouched. I didn't touch the ring. I touched only the fabric of the dress, with my fingertips, and closed the box before my breath betrayed what my face could still hold. Enea stayed on the sofa, in silence, his head against the back, watching the gulf, the way someone gives permission for me to cry without an audience. Why did you keep it? I said, in the voice that wasn't crying. Because throwing it out was admitting I had given up. Because I didn't have the courage to throw out the only future I had ever planned. I went back to the easel. I painted for another half hour without really seeing what I was painting. When I went up, I took the box with me. I set it on the floor next to the bed, and slept with my hand resting on the lid, as if I had found a small wounded animal, and promised to watch over its sleep until it settled. On Saturday morning, Enea asked if I wanted to visit Nonna. I said yes before I thought. I think she deserves to look at you up close before I decide anything. I'll go. You won't open your mouth except when she asks. Yes, signora. He smiled to one side when he said it, and I pretended not to see. Battista drove us to the Nonna's neighborhood, stopped the car 2 streets away, waited at the wheel. We climbed the 3 flights of narrow staircase with walls painted faded yellow, and the smell of tomato sauce from the neighbor on the 2nd floor entered my memory, the way it always had. Nonna opened the door with her apron tied on, and her white hair pulled back into a small bun. She looked at Enea from bottom to top, her at her 5'1", him at a hand's breadth taller. She didn't smile. She didn't invite us in immediately. She adjusted the apron with both hands and lifted her chin. "Come in, Don. It's been a long time since I wanted to look at you up close." Enea bowed his head, with the exact reverence one gives a small woman, with a weak heart and a spirit of steel. "Signora, sit, eat, then we'll talk." He sat. He ate 3 biscuits. I stayed leaning against the kitchen door frame, not knowing whether to laugh, to cry, to serve coffee. When she asked about his mother, he answered with a short sentence, and Nonna nodded the way she nods when an answer passes the test. When he finished, she carried his plate to the sink with her own hands, came back, sat down across from him, and laid her wrinkled fingers over his fingers on the table. "Don Marchetti," her voice was soft. "I know who you are. The whole city knows. I'm not going to tell you what they say. You already know." "I know, Signora." "Then hear me out once, and I swear I'll never take up your time again." She squeezed his hand with a firmness that seemed to come from another body, younger, more whole. "If you hurt my girl again, Don, I'll bury you myself, with these 2 hands, and the priest of the chapel sings whatever I tell him to." Enea looked at her like an 8-year-old boy in front of the school principal. "Yes, Signora." "Good." She let go of his hand, gave it a light pat, and stood up. "Now bring me flowers when you come back. Not white, I'm not dead. Red, the good kind." When I got up to leave, she held my hand under the table and squeezed. She didn't say anything. It was her way of saying I saw, and it's all right for now. I left there with her hand still warm on my cheek, my eyes full for no clear reason, and the narrow street ahead of me like a corridor of weak light. Enea walked slowly beside me, his shoulder lower because of the bandage, and didn't say anything for 2 blocks. And then, I don't know what happened. Nonna talking about the priest, the image of him saying, "Yes, Signora," the tomato sauce on the stove, the ivory dress closed inside the box in the bedroom. I laughed. It was a small laugh, real, that came out of my chest before asking permission. I covered my mouth with my hand, but it was too late. Enea stopped in the middle of the street, stopped for real, feet planted, shoulders turned in my direction, as if the sound had touched him. The tourists from the nearby market went around us as if we were an obstacle. "What is it?" I asked, still laughing. "Don't look at me like that. How long has it been?" "It's been a while. It's been 3 years." I looked away. It was instinct. He held my chin with 2 fingers, slowly, as if picking up a piece that might break, and made me look at him again. "That laugh is mine," he said. "No theatrics, no ornament, like someone claiming what had always been his." I swallowed hard. I felt the heat rising from my neck to my temple. "Not yet," he smiled to one side, let go of my chin. "Not yet," he repeated, like someone accepting a deadline, but writing down the date. We walked the rest of the way to the car in comfortable silence, shoulder almost touching shoulder, and I kept thinking, against my will, that comfortable silence is also a language. It takes years to learn it. At the mansion, at night, I went back to the library alone. Enea had gone to bed early because of the flank. Batista crossed the hallway, looked at me from a distance, and just asked if I'd like some tea. I said yes. He brought it on a simple tray, no doily, with 2 sesame biscuits, and went away. The mansion's library at night was something else. High ceiling, low lamp, the gulf outside spitting a warm wind that came in through the open window. I sat in the armchair by the window, took the book of frescoes off the low shelf, and this time I didn't close it after the 2nd page. I read the 17 folded pages, one by one. Mosaic of Montreal, Palatine Chapel, Cathedral of Cefalù. In each of them, in the margin, something scribbled in hard pencil, firm handwriting. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't a message. They were small letters, numbers, dates that didn't go with any fresco. I closed the book. I opened it again. I leafed through another page. More small letters, more numbers in the corner. A restorer recognizes a pattern before understanding the pattern. I didn't know what it was, but I knew what it wasn't. They weren't romantic passages. They weren't memories. They weren't kept notes. They were strange annotations. Numbers, abbreviations, dates I didn't know how to read. I pressed the book against my chest without realizing it. I thought of the box in the bedroom, of the folded dress, of the ring, of the name Sienna, of the line "She can't know," of "If I fall, you fall after," of anonymous foundation, of 3 years paying for medicine without a signature. I had learned in many years at the workbench that every work has 3 layers: the visible painting, the preparatory drawing underneath, and the hidden story in the wood, in the gesso, in the way the painter held the brush. The Madonna from the auction had a fire scar on the back of the panel that no one saw. I saw it. I went up the stairs with the book under my arm. I passed his door without touching the knob. In my room, I laid the book open over my chest, on top of my nightgown, and lay down on my back, looking at the ceiling. I rested my right hand on the pages. I felt the relief of the annotations even without seeing the words. I turned off the lamp, and I fell asleep with the book open over my heart, not yet knowing that, on the other side of the house, someone else wasn't sleeping either. Chapter 6. This time, you're not going away. I woke up with the book slid to the side, the folded page slightly creased by my own weight. I picked up the volume without making a sound, put it in the top drawer of the dresser, and went to wash up with the sense of carrying a question I myself didn't know how to formulate. Sunday dawned warm. The mansion had the silence of days when no one in the house needs to pretend. The gulf was glassy down below, deep blue, no waves. A small fishing boat scratched the water with the slowness of someone with nowhere to be. I had coffee alone on the veranda. Enea came down an hour later, his hair still damp, a gray shirt over the bandage, and stopped at the doorway before approaching, like someone asking permission without using words. "Sit," I said. It wasn't an invitation. It was the start of a conversation. He sat. He looked at my cup, then at my face. "We're going to talk now." "We are." We went back into the closed sitting room, away from the brightness of the veranda. The room had a high ceiling, a cold fireplace, 2 sofas facing each other, and an arched window overlooking the garden where I had already cried once without him knowing. I sat on one sofa, he sat on the other, not the same one. The distance was both our choice. "I'm not going to start with detours," I said. "Tell me what you can, everything you can, and tell me clearly what you still can't. I'll accept the can't. I won't accept maybe." He leaned forward a little, elbows on his knees, fingers laced. The bandage appeared again at the curve of the flank when his shirt rode up. I forced myself not to look. "Who sent the men at the parking lot?" "Cosimo Falcone, head of a rival clan. There are old reasons, and there are recent reasons. The old ones I'll tell you now. The recent ones will take a week. The line about Nonna's medicine that you didn't finish. It wasn't conscience. It was the only way I found to still be near you without putting you on a map I couldn't clean. The night 3 years ago, I lied because I believed it was the only way to take you out of a line you had entered without knowing. The list existed. The list still exists. I'm not in a position to tell you today who maintains the list, only that as long as the city believes you don't matter to me, the list ignores you. I didn't deserve you that day. I'm not here asking you to deserve me today. I'm only asking to finish telling you. Is there another woman? No. Was there? No. Not the way you're thinking. Not in 3 years. And the name, I said, and my voice almost trembled, but didn't tremble. The name on the phone, in the library. Sienna. He took a deep breath. He looked at the window, at the gulf, came back to me. It's the thing I most need to tell you, and the thing I least can tell you right now. It's not a woman in my bed. It's not a woman in my heart. It's not a woman, Perla. It's a piece in a game in motion, and any extra word today comes back to you as a knife tomorrow. Trust me 1 more week. 7 days. If by then I can't explain everything to you, I'll open the gate of the property myself and carry your bag out. The book, I said. The folded pages, the annotations. He looked up with a small, controlled fright. He didn't look away. You read it. I read it. It's not what it looks like. It doesn't look like anything, Enea. It looks like code. It is code. It's the only thing I can tell you today without putting you back on the list. I'll explain everything to you in 7 days, along with the rest. I looked at the frame of the arched window, at the corner of the rug where the fringe was turned the wrong way, at his knee, steady, not jiggling. Everything was static, and even so I felt the ground breathing. 7 days, I said. Not an hour more. Not an hour. And if in those 7 days I find anything that hurts me more than this waiting, I won't ask. I'll go. You'll go. And you don't come after me. He swallowed hard. And I don't come after. We stayed in silence for a while. It wasn't a beautiful silence. It was an honest silence. The kind that hurts, but holds. When he stood up, he did it slowly, with his good hand braced on the arm of the sofa, and held the other out to me. Come watch the sunset with me. I looked at his hand, looked at my own knee, looked at the arched window, and I took it. The veranda over the gulf received the end of the day with the calm of one who had already seen 1,000. The sky had opened up in burnt orange, then dusty pink, then a blue that wasn't of day or night. Down below, the lights of the small boats began to come on one by one, yellow points on the dark water. The low veranda sofa was long, with large raw linen cushions. I sat on the edge. He sat next to me, and after a brief moment of hesitation, slowly lay down, his head resting on my lap, his feet reaching the other arm of the sofa, his wounded shoulder up, his good side turned toward me. I didn't move, neither did he. I brought my hand to his hair, slowly, without deciding beforehand. The strands were softer than I remembered. I ran my fingers along his temple, along the short line behind his ear, along the nape where one longer hair was escaping from the cut. He closed his eyes. "You're breathing like someone falling asleep," I whispered. "I haven't slept in 3 years, Perla." "That's not true." "It is." I closed my eyes. "It's not the same thing." I went on running my fingers. He took my free hand, the left one, the one resting on the cushion, and brought it to his own chest. He pressed my fingers against the fabric of his shirt, on the exact spot where his heart was beating. Slow, firm, alive. "This time you're not going away." His voice was hoarse, lower than anything else he had said to me. I felt the line touch me before I understood it. "This time it's you who doesn't let me go." It was my half-smile that spoke. The voice came after. He opened his eyes. He looked at me from below, from the unlikely place of my lap, with that gaze of a man who had learned to look without scaring. And he raised himself slowly, every centimeter a choice, every centimeter a question, every centimeter space for me to step back. I didn't step back. His mouth touched my temple first. A dry, lingering kiss, like someone confirming. Then it went down to my cheek, then to the corner of my mouth. And only then, only when my breathing had already given up pretending, did it land on my whole mouth, without hurry, like someone relearning a language they know they haven't forgotten. I held the collar of his shirt with both hands. I didn't pull, I just held, like someone anchoring. When he pulled back, it was only as much as he needed to rest his forehead against mine. He smelled of soap, of veranda salt, of cedar kept in the box in the bedroom. He smelled of a man who had waited. "Come," he said, still low. "Inside." I stood up. He held my hand, like someone holding the last thread of something. The veranda was left behind. The untouched glass of wine on the side table, the closed book on the chair next to it, the night coming slowly over the Gulf of Naples, the yellow lights of the small boats beginning to blink in the distance. Behind us, the wind lightly stirred the open curtain, and no one closed it. He held my hand to the foot of the stairs. He looked up. He looked at me. I went up first. He followed me, with his hand always in mine. The bedroom door closed behind us. The next morning came into the room before me. The light was white, high, the kind that warns you it's no longer early. The sheet was wrapped around my leg. The t-shirt of his that I had borrowed in the middle of the night was riding uncomfortably up at the shoulder, and the room smelled of morning, of bed linen freshly washed, and of the warm scent of his hair sleeping 3 centimeters from my neck. His hand was at my waist, the weight of someone who trusts. His breathing came down regular against my skin. I lay still for a while just to listen. The slow rhythm, the air entering through the ribs, the half sigh he let out without waking. I smiled. It was a complete smile, inside and out. I turned my face slowly and looked at the room. The curtains open, the gulf out there glassy again, the wall clock marking an hour I never woke up at. The old box still on the floor next to the bed, on my side, closed. His bandage showing at the curve of his shoulder, cleaner than I had ever seen it. My eyes passed over the nightstand. His phone was there, forgotten, face down, screen dark, and it was for half a second. It was a quick flash, small as a speck. The name Sienna went through my head like the shadow of a bird flying high, weightless, without lingering. I covered his hand with mine, without squeezing, and let the shadow pass, for now. Lena here. That wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee. I thought he had finally chosen me. 3 weeks at the Marchetti mansion made me believe that lie with the taste of a miracle. His coffee waiting for me in the library, Aenea's shirt forgotten on the chair, his scent on the pillow, his hand at my waist during the night, firm, warm, possessive, as if, after everything, the place beside him were mine, as if I no longer needed to doubt, as if he had looked at the entire world and chosen to stay with me, until a stranger arrived. "This is Aurora," the woman said out loud, so the whole house could hear. "She's your daughter. When are you going to acknowledge her in front of your mistress?" And then, when I looked at him waiting for an explanation that would save me from shame, all he gave me was silence. That's when I understood the role that had perhaps always been mine. Not the chosen one, not the love, not the destiny, just the woman hidden in his bed, while his real life existed outside the door. Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Congratulations! Your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia romance and Billionaire romance to our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. A confirmation has also been sent to that same email. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book 2, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please feel free to interact. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to mystoriesromance.com and press play. Welcome to the family.